Yeah, hello and welcome. Yeah, it's the last talk of the day, and there are quite a few people. I was not expecting this, to be honest, but I mean, AI is always a buzzword which gets actually rooms full. So let's start right away. So we will talk about AI and cloud and how AI and cloud will change the way we code. And together with you and my colleague, we will explore the new generation of developers. So yeah, I'm Martin, and I'm working at Accenture now for 2 years. I'm currently enrolled in my master's studies at TU Wien. Actually, I did my bachelor's in TU Graz, so I always confuse that. And yeah, I'm a full stack cloud native developer, mostly working with TypeScript and Python on Azure and AWS.
Thank you. My name is Georgia Moldovan. I work in technology architecture, also at Accenture in Vienna. And I'm also doing my master's in software engineering with Martin at the TU Vienna. And I also work mainly in full stack and cloud native development with JavaScript, TypeScript, the usual, but also some Azure cloud, NetS. And first, I'd like to tell you why we actually chose this topic. So, yeah, we're passionate about trying out new tools and technologies, and we also like productivity tools. And because we work center, but we also do our university, we wanted to increase our productivity. And there's a huge hype in the last months and years about AI-assisted development, but also about coding in the cloud. So we wanted to dive deeper into we can see what the fuss is all about. First, we'll talk about AI-assisted development. So what is actually AI-assisted development? So when developers code, we use so many tools, so many technologies, extensions to make our life easier. From some fancy IDEs to extensions like for code formatting or auto importing, and so on. And some of these tools that developers use are AI based. And they can increase our productivity by making some suggestions. For example, some line completion, but also write our own functions for us, and so on. So how is all this possible, actually? In the last few years, the AI has been democratized, so it's spread, and now almost everyone uses some kind of AI-based technology in one form or another, including people that are not from a technical background or that don't have development or AI experience. Also, the hardware is more available than ever. Powerful GPU stacks are available through all the cloud providers and so on. There have been huge advancements in fields of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. And there are also a huge amount of data sets for example, all the open source projects on GitHub. So this is how and some AI was developed, some AI technologies were developed in order to improve our development experience. So who does it and what areas do actually exist in this field? So first of all, we can see the technologies that that help us write code on the left side. And then there we can see the technologies that help us with software testing. Also, some technologies help us make code analysis, compliance, scan for vulnerabilities, and so on. And some tools also help us with application monitoring. So GitHub Copilot is a tool that was really talked about in the last months and years. There's a hype about it, so we will dive a little bit deeper into the topic. So according to GitHub Copilot, it is an AI pair programmer that helps developers write better code, and it helps them to not fly solo. Under the hood, GitHub Copilot evolved from an algorithm called GPT-3. This was developed by OpenAI, and it's used currently in applications such as, for example, Duolingo. But for development purposes, it didn't really give the best results. So this is why it was bought by Microsoft, and it was turned into GitHub Copilot. So because Microsoft had easy access to all the open source code on GitHub, they were able to train the model and make it into what Copilot is today. But the fact that it trains on all open source code on GitHub is also problematic, and this is a really debated topic because it also makes suggestions to developers based on licensed code, and this shouldn't happen. So be careful where you use Copilot. Some of the features that it has, so it's super easy to set up. You just need to install an extension in your favorite IDE. You need to log in with GitHub, and you don't need to turn it on or anything. There's no interaction needed. You just need to start writing your code, and Copilot can give you suggestions based on your input. And this input can either be comments, or it can also be like variable names or function names. And Copilot give you some input. Another very interesting feature is an extension developed by Copilot Labs. So it's still an experimental feature. It's not released yet, but I think it has a lot of potential. So Copilot developed this extension that is able to translate code from one programming language to another. And also by making explanations block by block. So for example, if you want to translate some software from one programming language to another and you don't know one of them, Copilot can help you understand what each block is doing and how it looks like in the other programming language. Here you can see some examples on the left side. This is actually an example from a coding challenge that I did in university. I had to write a function, turn left, and based on the code that I had so far in the file, it just suggested the whole function. It was exactly what I needed, and I was just able to press tab, and I had the function. So sometimes it's where it works really well. The second example, it shows how you can also write a comment and open the GitHub Copilot tab or window, and you can also see 10 solutions, 10 possible solutions. And you can scroll down and pick the one you like best and just accept it and use it.
So, GitHub Copilot is kind of the new kid of the party, but Tab9 has been around for quite a long time now. And it's nearly the same, let's put it that way, but the main focus of Tab9 is really to speed up you as a developer. So, while GitHub Copilot focuses more on comments to text, so natural language to code, Tab9 focuses more on whole line completion or full function completion. This means it gives you hints which functions are in your code base and which functions you might need right now. That's actually quite a difference. You can see it here. It's from a promotion video from Tab9 actually. And it gives you more smart inputs and smart hints what you could use as your next command. Yeah. Under the hood, Tab9 is based on GPT-2. That's the predecessor of GPT-3. And it also uses another training model. It's only trained on permissive open source licenses and on trusted code repositories. This means you will only find the global available model, put it that way, will only use MIT or BSD or Apache licensed source code, which is great. Compliance will love this because basically the code produced by the AI is not there's no copyright, or at least only MIT or BSD or Apache. So that's good. You can share your model with your coworkers, and everything stays on your machine. That's also really important. You can opt in to train the model in the cloud if you're a big company, but you don't have to, just can use it on your machine. So in a nutshell, when should we use what? If you're in a low-code environment and you have a developer team which is not so experienced, you should definitely consider using Copilot. You just describe what you want AI to write, and your AI does it. It's quite. If you have developers which are quite experienced, you should maybe use Tab9 because the thing with developers is we don't like if someone tells us what we should. So step 9 gives us smart hints, but we can ignore them, and we don't have to use them. But in 9 of 10 cases, it's quite a good idea. So good ideas. This brings us to the next topic. It's coding in the cloud. We will talk about instant development. So why? The short answer is for us, I mean, working in consultancy, we switch a lot between projects. We switch a lot between languages, and for us, languages such as tools and development environments such as resources. So in this case, this means we have a ton of SDKs on our laptops. We have a lot of libraries in different versions on our machine, and they just pile up. And that's not that great. And it would be somehow great to have a unified environment for each project, which we just can spin up, work on every laptop without carrying around our, say, Accenture laptop or a private laptop if we have to do something for our personal stuff. And that's actually what the concept is right here is you have a cloud hosting opportunity, you have a VM or a Kubernetes environment, and you have a Docker. And in this Docker container, you have repository, your language SDK, and some extension, which you might need for your. And then you can connect via the browser to this environment. You spin up, or you can also spin up Studio Code on your local environment, connect to the remote environment, code there, the code will get compiled there and reflect back to the machine. So you get, if you're, for example, web development, you just get a link where you get access to the environment. But it only works great for web development and CLI tooling. If you're into mobile native web, it won't work. Yes, because every environment is different, and we have to make sure the right environment, the right packages, and the right versions are in place. You have different ways to configure your environment. So you have either JSON or YAML, which is basically the top layer, where you say, hey, I want this image, I want this configuration, and this tools inside my box, which I can spin up, connect with. Or you can go a bit deeper, configure the image by your own. In this case, just can add some, say you have some fancy compiler on an in-house registry for image registry or whatever. You just pull it there and stop.
Okay, so another in a nutshell. We can see here a comparison between the two biggest competitors when it comes to coding in the cloud. The first one is GitHub Codespaces, and the second one is Gitpod. So they are quite similar. We can talk about what each of them does, but mainly they're both offer developers a cloud-based development environment. They're both configurable and very easy to use. However, there are a few differences. For example, the first one, it's pretty obvious. GitHub Codespaces is integrated by default in the GitHub environment. While Gitpod is not directly default integrated, but you can install an extension and make it integrated, so it's not that big of a deal, I think. Then you have the infrastructure, which is quite different. So Codespaces runs on VMs in Azure, as Microsoft, and Gitpod runs on lightweight containers. And these lightweight containers can also be, by default, they are on GCP, but they can also be on your, you can also self-host them on your own cluster or so on. And because of this infrastructure difference, the startup time is quite different. So GitHub Codespaces environments start up way slower than Gitpod because lightweight containers. But the security is different. So with Codespaces, the security is of course better because we have an isolated environment. And with Gitpod not, because we use containers on shared infrastructure. So this is an important factor. So Codespaces offers support for just Visual Studio Code, while Gitpod offers support for all your favorite IDEs. And Codespaces also offers just connector to GitHub. So if you want a connector to GitLab or Bitbucket, you should use Gitpod. Speaking of startup times, this is quite an interesting story. So Gitpod uses a technique in order to start up their workspaces way faster. Namely, they pre-build their projects at a previous commit. And when the developer wants to start up the development environment, they just need to click a button, and the startup time is much smaller. While GitHub Codespaces doesn't do this, and only when the developer wants to start the development environment, they begin the loading process, and then they build a project. So it takes more time. Here you can see some differences regarding their licensing and their billing. So Codespaces doesn't offer a free option, while Gitpod does, up to an amount of minutes. I forgot how many, about 100. The licensing is also different. Only Gitpod offers self-hosted options, and the billing program is also a bit different. Yeah.
So we will start with the live coding session and show off a bit what can Copilot actually do, and we will use Gitpod as a remote environment. But full disclaimer here, we tried this demo like 4 times and we got 4 different results. So it either will work or it won't work. So we will see. I mean, it's an AI who's actually coding, so we don't know how it went. So if you are registered to Gitpod, you just can log in and then click on your dashboard, open the last Gitpod, basically. And now, by default, the ID will start on the cloud, and you will see eventually Visual Studio Code start. But now we can connect Visual Studio Code with our local installation, which we have to because Copilot does not work in the browser yet. And the goal for today will be writing an API, which does the following. Let's say, so the problem scope will be we have users, and users have some interests, and they are on a certain location. And we want Copilot to write us an API and mock us some user data to say which people are near us with the same interests. So for this problem, we just make the assumption that the Earth is flat. So it's easier a bit actually it's easier to understand for everyone because you just have to calculate the Euclidean distance because somehow we have to assert that Copilot does the right. So just have to use the Euclidean distance. And yeah, we can start up. So maybe we should start off by baking some data. So we should say Copilot create a constant that returns a function, which is actually called getUsers. And in this getUsers array, there are objects which describe a user. And each user has some properties, like we said, maybe an ID, a name, position, and some interests. Yes, and we see. Okay. So you see, we had some first results. Position was interpreted wrong, but we can fix that up later. But it's quite impressive what we got so far. We are fine with B. This would continue, go on till infinity, basically. So So the first index, the zeros index in the array would be the x coordinate, second would be the y coordinate, and now we can write a function which should actually returns us the user near us. So we give it certain radius, and we then should get as a return a user which is in this radius. And here what hopefully you will see here is that Copilot is really, really good in algorithmic problems. That's huh? Yeah, that's good. Sure. No. Yeah. For example, we never saw the whole dialogue. We just gave him the one sentence, and now he was just like, "Your number." I think it's the second. No, it would be in red. Yeah. So actually, what you see here is the Euclidean distance, which is actually correct using. So uses everything we wanted him to do. That's. And then we would need another function that gives us common interests of users. So filter out the common interests of some users. And this also looks correct. And now what we can do now is say, okay, let's put everything together. So what we want to have now is an HTTP server, but since we do not use any libraries because we are in a node environment, but everyone uses libraries and we just don't. So we will use the native HTTP package from Node for the HTTP. Yeah, it's a huh? Stop. So what you can also do is if you get stuck or Copilot gets stuck, you can open a tab to look at all possible results and then choose manually which result you want to accept. So this actually is everything we wanted to show you. But there is an error, right? Yeah, there are some syntax problems sometimes, like missing brackets. Oh, too much code. So now when we run the application, in theory, we should see users in the radius of 2 near location 1, 1. Once again, the execution of this whole code now is in the cloud, but gets mirrored back to our local machine. So yeah, that's Crazy, yeah. Yeah, that's actually it from our side. I think we are quite good in time. Are there some questions? Is it possible to combine GitHub Copilot and Tab9? Yes and no. You can install both of them in your IDE, but you cannot use them at the same time. But you can manually switch between them. So how does Tab9 collect the data for suggestions, and what are the sources for training the AI? So depending on which model you opt in, there is a global model available which only is trained on trusted open source project. What that means, I'm not sure entirely about it. They don't tell more about it, but you can be sure that's either it's mostly MIT based licensing. You're using tools in your. Are we using these tools in our day-to-day development? Yeah.
Yeah. So we use Step9. I use Step9, but I don't use Copilot for work. I used Copilot for some university coding challenges, and it was quite useful. So Copilot, in my experience, is really good with algorithmic. It's not very good with, for example, writing front-end code, but it's good with just pure logic. And about code spaces and Gitpod, I use Gitpod. Martin uses the code spaces, but not for work, mostly for university and private projects.
Or C++. So the question is, which tool works the best for C++? I'm pretty sure it will work the best with. Yeah, I guess probably with Tab9 it will work quite good. I used it once with C++ and Tab9, but that was like 3 or 4 years ago. So I don't know how it will perform. I'm pretty sure Copilot will not perform that good on it because there's not so many code available C++ wise on GitHub. I think the most repositories are actually Python and JavaScript. So yes, clients have to approve this, but we only use them for our private projects. So there's no client data involved, and we only use it on our local private machines.
Yes, we should remove useless comments, of course. And sometimes you just need to rewrite the comments so it gives you a more specific answer or suggestion.
So is our company worried if we use tools like Copilot and Tab9? So since we are not using these tools on our company laptop and on our work projects, for us, I think we are quite safe. But actually, if if you want to use them for your work project, you have to get approval. And